Yeah, limited everyone. Uh, Thank you for inviting me again for part three of Monoreality. And the title for this part of the lecture series is Know Your Imam. And I've specifically said your Imam and not my Imam, not our Imam, but your Imam. And the reason for that hopefully will become clear as we go through today's presentation. So let's begin first by just having a very brief overview of what we have said about monoreality. The fundamental thing that we have concluded is that we are all manifestations of one universal soul. We are all manifestations of the same one creator. Um, we may be different in bodily senses, but in terms of our essence, we are one. And just as we are from that one soul, we also all have the same potential to realize that single origin, to understand it, to experience it, to completely acknowledge it. We are fundamentally that one single unity. But then we have to ask the question, if we are already all that one single unity, if we all have the same potential, if we all are from one single soul, do we need anyone in order to find our way back? If we are already connected to that one soul, if every human being is that one soul, then can I not find my own way back? Are we not all equal? What is the difference between each of us in terms of our potential? And if we need somebody, then what is so special about that someone that makes them better able to traverse this path than we can? And if that person is special, but are we not both manifestations of the same one soul? And have we not been told that each one of us has got the entire universe in us? So, what is it that is special about this other person? And have we not been told that if I know myself, I will know my Lord? So, if all I need to do is to know myself, why do I need somebody else? And let's look at what Maulana Sultan Mashah has said in Usul Din. All rainwater eventually reaches the sea once again. The same is true of the soul. The soul too has its abode, and the abode of the soul is infinite. So even this extract tells us that we are all going to be united with that one true soul. What else does that Farman say? If somebody amongst you were to aim at being like Pir Sadruddin, Pir Shams, or Mansur, you can indeed achieve such a status. You can rise even higher. So the Imam is saying again, if we were all to try and try enough, we all have the potential to become like the peers, to go even higher. And then this is the really strange one. Imam says, it is not that only Hazrat Ali's progeny can attain this status. Whoever is determined enough will be able to reach the goal. So, in Imam's own words, we all have the same potential. We can all reach the same status. So, once again, why do we need somebody, no matter how special they are, when all of us have the same potential? So we need to understand where we are and where we can be. And the best example of that is to use a seed and a tree. We know that a seed, given the right circumstances, given the right nurturing, will grow into a tree. Some trees are hundreds of feet tall. But can you say that the seed is a tree? No, of course not. A seed is far from being a tree. It has the capability, given the right circumstances, to become a tree, but it is not a tree. And this is where we need to talk about what is potential and what is actual. So, regardless of what potential we have, we are certainly not all equal. We all have the potential to become something in our lives, but we are not equal in that regard. We all have the potential to do certain things, but we may not have all done that certain thing. The seed does not become a tree until it actually grows into a tree. The seed is a potential, not an actual. And how does the seed get nurtured? Can the seed grow into a tree regardless of what environment it's given? No. If I were to drop a seed on hard, stony ground, it wouldn't grow into a tree. It needs external elements to enable it to grow. And can the seed provide its own nurturing? Again, on the stony ground, no, it won't find the minerals and the water that it needs. And even on certain types of ground, it needs additional water to be given to it by additional sources. It may not all come naturally. So, in order for every potential to actualize, it has to follow a certain path. It isn't a free for all. The potential does not become the actual no matter what path it takes. It needs to follow a specific path in order to actualize. So let's try and look at an example of um, how we can explain some of these elements. Let's assume that we're living in a valley that is relatively dry. It has a little bit of greenery. It has tall mountains on either side, and the mountains are very, very overpowering. And this is what we know as our life. Everything that we have is here. We are comfortable. We do not starve. We're eating fine. We have families. And it is a life that we believe for us is perfect. Some people who are adventurous try and venture out, but they don't go too far because all they see are barren mountains. So they come back. But it is possible that surrounding this dry land, there is a different kind of land beyond those mountains, beyond the reaches of where we can get to. There could be luscious green forests and beautiful blue seas, but we do not see them. But how do we know that there is something on the other side? All we see is our dry mountains, tall mountains that we cannot climb. How can we ever know what is on the other side? We need to have knowledge of the other side or access to somebody who has knowledge of the other side. On our own, we may never know that there was something there. But if somebody who has been there tells us, and we believe them, then that is one way we will know. So let's look at a particular concept in the Quran, and this concept is known as the confluence of two oceans. And this is found in a few places, but one specific place is 1860. And this concept is actually given as part of the story of Hazrat Musa. but it has a much wider connotation in terms of our beliefs. And Majmul Bahrain, the confluence of two oceans, has been explained in a number of ways by our peers. It is the confluence of the Zahir and the Batin. It is the meeting of unity and multiplicity. It is the confluence of Tanzil and Ta'wil. It is the meeting of universal intellect and universal soul. It is that point of union and separation. So this concept of confluence of two oceans has been described as the confluence or the meeting point of two different worlds, of this world and of that world. And it is also the confluence of what we have called monoreality and manifestation. But then the Quran also refers to something else about this confluence, that there is a barrier. He has made two oceans to flow so that they meet together. Between them there is a barrier which they cannot pass. A barrier which they cannot pass. And let's look at another element. Now has come unto you a light from God and a manifest book, whereby God guides those who seek his good pleasure on the paths of peace. He brings them out of darkness unto light by his permission and guides them on a straight path. He brings them out of darkness unto light by his permission. So this confluence of two oceans has a barrier. And the crossing of this barrier from dark to light, from Zahir to Batin, requires permission. And the interpretation that we have been given around the confluence, apart from those general things of the Zahir and the Batin, is that it is the Imam of the time who is the real confluence of two oceans. He straddles this world and that world. He straddles the Zahir and the Batin. He straddles the monoreal and the manifest. But what about the permission? And we've been told that the permission is related to Ismi Azam, that it is only through the Ismi Azam given by the Imam that one is able to traverse from this world to that world. That is the position of the confluence of two oceans in the form of the Imam. So let's try and understand a little bit more about what we've been told about the Imam. And for that, let's look at in the Quran again, Surah 17, Ayat 71. The day when we will call every people with their respective Imam. The day when we will call every people with their respective Imam. Now, one of the really difficult things about the Quran is that most of us can only read English. And the Quran's Arabic language is very, very complicated. And it is complicated enough that even native Arab speakers find some of the Arabic very difficult. But we have to learn to understand some basic principles of how to read the Quran, not in Arabic, but at least to be able to look at certain Arabic words and be able to understand what the linkages are. So in that regard, in this particular verse, we need to look at two specific Arabic words. The first is the word that's used for every people, and that is bolded on the screen. It is part of this word unasin, and the word is nas. And in Arabic, nas doesn't just refer to a people of one area, or a people of my town, or a people of my family. It is all people. And the other word, obviously, is imam. And in this case, it is part of this phrase, bi imamihim, with their imam. So keep these two words in mind, and we're now going to look at another verse. And this verse is Surah 2, Ayat 124. And remember that Abraham was tried by his Lord with certain commands, which he fulfilled. He said, I will make thee an imam to all people. I will make thee an imam to all people. Now, what you will find is that in many places, that word imam is translated in a number of different ways. And we have to be clear of context and understand that translations sometimes get things wrong, because they are, after all, translations with a particular translator's viewpoint, and hence the need to look at the Arabic. So let's look at what the specific words in this ayat are. Again, you will see the same two basic words. So where it talks about I will make thee an imam to all people, we obviously have imaman, so that is the base word in there is imam. And then we have to all people, lil nasi, that word nas is there. So why am I focusing on these two things? The thing that we need to focus on is that word nas and its relationship to the imam. The word nas in the Arabic is very specific to all people, not a set of people in a particular place, but to all people. And this verse clearly says, Abraham was made the imam for all people. He was the imam an-nas. And in the same way in the previous one, it said that every people will be called with their imam. So let's summarize what we have so far. That in order to understand something that you cannot see, something that is out of your reach, you need knowledge of that side. You need knowledge of that hidden area. We've also seen from what the Quran says that in this particular case of the confluence, there is a barrier and there is a need of permission. And what we've also just looked at is this concept of Imam al-Nas, that from the Quran's own viewpoint, the declaration of Imam is not just for a specific set of people. It is for all people, everyone. So looking at all of these things, this is not about limiting our potential, but providing a specific pathway for our potential to be actualized. Remember, there was a specific pathway to turn a seed into a tree. In the same way, there is a specific pathway for us to realize our potential as being that universal soul. But this now raises several questions, because we've now spoken about things like the confluence, we've spoken about the need for permission, we've spoken about the Imam al-Nas, the Imam of all people. And that should start raising several questions in our heads. So let's first look at this concept that we are very familiar with, and that is Nurun ala Nur, light upon light. And we apply that light upon light to the 49 Imams of our Ismaili faith. And that began with Hazrat Ali and continues today till Shah Karim. And we as a community, as a faith, have been blessed with this concept of the confluence of two oceans in the form of the Imam. And we're also blessed with the ability to receive Ismi Azam and gain that permission. But we have to ask ourselves whether this is not an injustice. If you look at the flow of prophethood and Imams, we have several prophets and we obviously have our 49 Imams. For those that were born in the time of the Imams, they had a very clear path. For those that were born in the time of the prophets, they had a very clear path. But what about those that are born in between the times of prophets? What about those that are born between the time of Musa and Isa, or between Nuh and Ibrahim? Are they left stranded? Are they not able to fulfill being called with their Imam? Are they not able to receive permission? How can that be just when we all call Allah, we call God merciful, beneficent, and just? How can this be justice for God to leave an entire set of people without the ability to fulfill what God Himself has said is going to happen? That cannot be right. So then let's look at Imamat from the perspective of monoreality. Is Imamat time limited? If Imamat began with Hazrat Ali, as most of us, or at least I was brought up to understand, how do we explain the ayah in 2:124, which says that Abraham was declared an Imam? He was several thousand years prior to Hazrat Ali. So clearly, according to the Quran, Maulana Ali was not the first Imam. At the very least, Hazrat Ibrahim was the first Imam. And then, as I've already raised, if we believe there is this concept of the confluence of two oceans, that person that straddles the hidden and the seen, and that person who is the barrier, and that person who can give the permission, how is that permission, how is that izn given prior to the time of Ali? And one thing about the fundamental principles of the Quran is that these fundamental principles need to exist at all times. Whatever is deemed to be a fundamental principle cannot be time constrained. It cannot be contingent. It has to exist at all times. If the confluence of two oceans is a fundamental principle, then it has to exist at all times as the means of the manifest comprehending the monoreal, of the people in this world being able to have access to that world. Let's look at another hadith related to the Imamate. Were the world to be bereft of the Imam for but an instant, it would be convulsed with all its inhabitants. Were the world to be bereft of the Imam for but an instant, it would be convulsed with all its inhabitants. In simple terms, if the Imam were not here even for a second, the entire world would be destroyed. So if Imamat began with Hazrat Ali, how can this hadith be true for the time before Ali? And this is not speaking about Imamat in a given point of time. This is speaking about the world being without the Imam at any time. And the case is that our peers have actually told us that Imamat did not begin with Hazrat Ali. Hazrat Ali was the first revealed Imam. It was the first time at Ghadir Qum that Imamat was revealed openly. That does not mean that Imamat did not exist prior to that, exactly as has been pointed out with the case of Hazrat Ibrahim. Imamat has to continue throughout the ages as a means of guidance, as a means of being the confluence, as a means of providing the permission to cross that barrier between this world and that world. And that chain of Imams has been well documented within the writings of our peers. But what about the beginning of Imamat? When did Imamate begin? Okay, we can accept it did not begin with Hazrat Ali, but when did it begin? Our general understanding is that the first person was Hazrat Adam, but scientifically we know that does not really match up. We know that the history of the world has been proven to be much older, that um, remnants of human bones have been found much, much before that time. So was Adam the first man? The first thing we have to ask, and we went through this in the prior sessions, Sultan Bashar has clearly indicated in the memoirs that creation is a constant and perpetual event. Well, if creation is a constant and perpetual event, and looking at that hadith, that there always needs to be an Imam present in the creation, and looking at the other ayat, that every people will be called with their Imam, then there cannot be a beginning for the Imamate, because creation is constant and perpetual. The confluence has to be constant and perpetual. So, does the Imamate have a beginning? Imamate has to be there at all time if, as we believe now, that creation is there at all times as a result of the manifestation of the divine will. And we have said already that monoreality implies that there is a coexistence of the hidden and the manifest all times. That line of creation doesn't work. That line of creation is a very basic understanding. The whole concept of monoreality indicates that there is a coexistence of the hidden and the visible at all times, and therefore there is a coexistence of the confluence of oceans as well at all times. And to be clear about the story of Adam, Adam was not the first man in any absolute sense. He was the first of a particular cycle. We have mentioned again several times that we believe in the concept of cycles, particular cycles of evolution, particular cycles of religious evolution. And Adam was the first of that cycle of religious evolution. And remember, the Quran says Adam was chosen. If Adam was chosen, there has to be more than one person in order for you to choose. So let's look at the concept of the Imam of every people, Imam al-Nas. Is the Imamate only for the Ismailis? To understand that, we need to look at the example of fish in water. There are different kinds of fish that live in the seas, in the rivers, but they all live in water. Does a fish realize that it is swimming in water? No. But if you take the water away, that fish will not survive. The same goes with us. In our day-to-day lives, we do not consciously think of the fact that we are surviving due to air, that we are surrounded by air, that it is the air that is actually keeping us alive. But if we remove that air, we absolutely realize the lack of that air immediately. Then the question we also ask is, this whole concept of manifestation, of our return, of finding our way back to our origin, is that only applicable to some of us? Remember 1771, we will call every people with their Imam, not some people, every people. So that concept of the Imam being representative to every people is fundamental to our understanding of Imamate. And when I said in the beginning, it is about knowing your Imam. It is your Imam because it is the Imam specific to your time. It is the Imam who will be a witness of your time. And finally, let's look at a summary of the role of the Imam. We have said that the Imam is there um, for all time because creation is constant and perpetual. We've also said that Imam is there for all of humanity. And that's the part that we need to think about carefully in terms of what has happened in the last 100 years. Imam's fundamental role is to be Imam Nas, is to be the one with whom you will be called as a witness. And if we look at what has happened from the time of Maulana Sultan Muhammad Shah, and in the memoirs, he is very beautifully explained how when he fled from, when his forefathers fled from Persia and moved to Bombay, how that was a relief and from all the persecution that had occurred previously. We were persecuted as a faith. We were persecuted as a people. We were almost demolished. But we survived. And it is the Imams who kept this faith going and the guidance going. And it is in the time of Sultan Ahmad Shah that there was an absolute blossoming of this faith in terms of its visibility globally. The Imam started to make himself known in all the major global settings, in the League of Nations, which is today the United Nations. The Imam knew key people, and his position as the Imam of the Ismailis became more and more known. And then look at the level at which our current Imam has taken it. Sultan Mashar deliberately acknowledged that he would pass the imamate to somebody who was of the atomic age, somebody who would be of the modern age of science. And what has the Imam done? The Imam has spread his word, has spread his name, has spread his visibility through an institution like the AKDN. The Imam's primary role is not the AKDN. It is not about social service. But that AKDN has been the means for the Imam to be known, for the Imam to have global visibility. In today's age of technology, today's age of the internet, of media, it is this vehicle that is making the Imam known to every corner of the world as Imam Nas. And his ultimate role is the guidance of all people back to their origin, the realization of our potential to our actual, the realization that we're all part of one monoreality, the realization that we all have within us that universe, if only we will make the effort to find it. So we need to look at our blessings that we have this guide for all humanity so close to us, but we need to make sure we do not show ingratitude for that, because more and more his position is getting known globally, and um, there will come a time when, and there is a very famous thing my parents used to keep telling me, that a time will come that you will not even be able to touch the hem of the coat of the Imam. And we can see today how busy the Imam is with all of the engagements, all of the global things he has to do, and the number of people that are requesting his presence all over the world. So I hope that's given us some better understanding of the Imam's role in terms of what the Quran says and what the Hadith have said, and this whole concept of the Imam and Nas. Thank you, and Yani Madad.